Let's continue looking at cabinet materials for loudspeakers, and let's look at this time at plywood, at nicer quality plywood. At the previous episode we looked at the lower grade choices, which are also cheaper and used by most commercial solutions. Uh, and here this is something nicer, and then you see this is a 3-ply plywood, and the top layer is pretty nice, bottom layer nice. It is glued and pressed properly. However, this is still not good enough to use for a loudspeaker project, because when you look at it, the middle layer is not very good quality. It's something really porous. So you see the wood here has lots of little tiny holes in it. So it's a low quality, fast growing wood, and it's only 3 layers. So that's not giving it much mechanical strength. So so what happens if you try to use this as a loudspeaker cabinet? It will warp a lot. So instead of just resonating at those frequencies where the air pressure is moving inside the cabinet, it will just start warping on its own, and we don't want that. Now this is something that we want. This is a similar scenario, but better quality wood and many more layers, and this, the number of layers, actually the more layers you have, the stronger it becomes, because each of the layers have these long fiber structures in them running along the entirety of your plank, of your piece, and that's what gives it strength. But it's very thin. One layer is super thin, so it's not strong by itself. But if you add another layer, then that has different fiber density in it. They run in different direction, and that when you add multiple of those together, it becomes very strong. It's the same thing as having sheets. So if you have a cotton sheet and you have a gun or arrow, you shoot through it, the bullet or the arrow pierces the sheet and goes through. But if you have like 12 sheets, uh, one behind the other, then the bullet will not go through the last sheet, because each layer will just remove some energy from the momentum, and by the last one there will be no energy left. This is a similar thing. It's a little different what is happening, because the sheet is totally flexible, it doesn't have any rigidity. Here the sheets are much more thicker than a bed sheet, and they are able to resonate, and not as and by adding multiple of them, that's how they become very strong, and that's the kind of strength we want. And let's see how nature itself produces such layering, and we can see it in a felled tree. So if we look at the cross section, you see these edge lines, the rings of the tree, and basically each year as the tree grows, there's the summer season, the spring summer season, when there's a lot of rain, a lot of sunshine, and the tree expands at a high speed. And then we got the late fall and winter, when there's much less rain, much less sun, and the speed of growth of the tree slows down. And here you can see that those parts of the ring, which are those thicker, lighter color parts, that's when it grows very fast. And then you have that dark color, very thin ring. That's when it's the winter time, and the tree cannot put that much material into itself, so its growth slows down to close to zero during the winter. And then next summer, when the tree gets a year older, again fast expansion, and then slow during the winter. And as you go by each ring, that's each year in the age of the tree. And as you see, as the tree grows older and older, the rings are getting narrower and narrower, because the tree is also getting taller and taller. So there's a much more material to be packed into the tree, so it cannot become so much wider. It cannot keep this pace for every single year. And also there are some years when there's more rain, and then the tree can have like bigger rings like those ones, and there are years when there was not enough rain, and there you can see like narrower rings than that. So you can tell also like what were the conditions during those times. However, how does this relate to us in audio? It relates to us that the denser the rings are, the greater the tensile strength of the tree is. And when you make wood from a tree to be used as a music instrument, they cut it like this. So you see where you have like the very dense ring structures, and that's where you want to cut. You don't want this middle part, because there the rings are not dense enough. You want this great density, because that density, that is responsible for the strength of the tree, meaning that the tree can hold those tons and tons, sometimes tens of tons of weight in its branches and leaves, and it can maintain its structure even in a heavy wind, or even when there is like a lot of snow, giving extra weight to the tree to hold the branches. And these are the tight rings that create that tensile strength. So really, when you see denser rings, then that means it is literally a much stronger wood. And let's see. Now, so here I'm showing you what is it happening. So when you have a music instrument, all of the music instruments use wood, which is that high quality wood when you have many age rings next to each other. And that's why you cannot just make a music instrument out of any piece of wood, because if you make it from here, it's not strong enough. So instead of having a beautiful tone as a violin, it will sound more and more like a cardboard box. And that's why the highest grade of violins are so rare and so exceedingly expensive, because the wood they use, that has even like hundreds of layers of ply in them. So basically it's cut from trees which are hundreds of years old, and when you see that the lines are so densely packed next to each other, it means that that piece of wood has tremendous strength in it. And all of these edge lines, all the grain lines, run across the entire length of the instrument, and that is absolutely vital, because you need an unbroken fiber structure to be able to transmit the lowest frequency resonance. If it's broken here in the middle, so you are using one piece of wood here and one piece of wood for the upper half, then the resonance that is generated in the lower half, it will not be in the same mode as the resonance generated in the upper half. So you are getting 1 octave higher resonances. So your music instrument won't be able to have like a nice deep violin tone. It will just have like those screechy high sounds. And the same thing is true if you do not have enough of these grain lines, of the markings in the wood, then it doesn't have the strength to resonate, to vibrate at a wide frequency range. And that's why a cheaper, lower grade violin is not as loud as a master instrument, and it doesn't have that frequency range, so the voice doesn't carry, it's not as clear, not as pure, and that's because of the lack of these dense edge lines. And when we use a plywood, we mimic the same thing that is used for instrument, which is these grain lines. And unfortunately, as you can see, when you use plywood for your loudspeaker, it's not going to be as good as using spruce, like that is like a Stradivarius quality spruce, because simply the wood that is high enough quality to make a Stradivari or a Guarneri violin, there's maybe one or two of those trees growing in every century. That's how hard it is to find them, because for these lines to grow perfectly straight, the tree needs to be in an area that's protected from wind, because there is excessive wind shear. Then the lines, as the tree is bending, then the lines will be curved, they will be not running straight, and if the lines are curving, that changes the characteristics of the violin. And also the tree needs to grow very, very slow for the edge rings to be packed and to be even. And of course, if we would build loudspeaker cabinets, if we would build them from this grade of wood, that would be the best sounding loudspeaker cabinet. But the price of that, because this kind of wood is so rare, if someone could make a Stradivari grade loudspeaker, the price of that loudspeaker would make $1 million speaker look like a cheap disposable toy, because it would be in the many tens or maybe $100 million range to make such a loudspeaker. And it probably you would need to wait at least 30-40 years until such a quality lumber is found, is procured, and is prepared for the production of the said loudspeaker. So we do not have access to that type of resources when we are building loudspeakers, so we have the second best choice, which is this sort of plywood, where it mimics that quality of wood that's used for violins, for guitars, for pianos, in that way that we have the grain structure that's running along the entire length of the plywood sheet. And we have, unfortunately, do not have 100 layers of it. We have maybe like 11 layers or 13 layers. That's all we get. And there's one more price to pay for that, and that price is that when you have your violin, then one key of violin sound is to keep the top part, the resonating part, and the bottom part very thin. So if you look at it, it's just a few millimeters thin, and because of that thinness, it can resonate. And whatever sound is inside that is in the body of the violin, which acts as an acoustic cabinet, it's like a loudspeaker. And instead of a driver, you have strings here. And those things that you see, that's the port. So basically, a violin is a ported loudspeaker cabinet that uses strings instead of a electrodynamic driver to create the sounds. And for the violin to be efficient, you need this density of the grain structure, and you also need thinness. So if you would make the violin thicker, then it would totally kill the carrying capacity of the violin. You would diminish the low frequency response of the violin greatly. So basically, then you would predominantly hear just the strings, and it would be a harsh metallic sound without the beautiful wooden body of the violin. And the same thing is for loudspeakers. First of all, we want strength that comes from the multiple layers, but if we go for a too thick layer, we are killing that ability of the loudspeaker to transmit the resonances which are inside the cabinet's cavity into the other side, which is the air of your room. So I think I have some here. So this is what happens. So you have your sheet of plywood, that's the wall, that's the baffle of your loudspeaker, and let's say that this is the inside of your loudspeaker, and that is the room. Let's just pick this one sheet, let's say that that's your cabinet. Then whatever resonances are inside the room that are created by the back pressure of your loudspeaker, that's making this plywood move. And those movements are transferred to the air of the room. Now, there are two things for these movements, the transference of them. The thicker your plywood is, the less of that energy is transferred to room. So most of the energy will be trapped as and transferred to heat, as these multiple plies try to shear on top of each other, but they ultimately resist the resonances, and the energy will be dying and converted as heat, and you will not have sound coming out of it. And for one thing, what you always heard so far is that that's a good thing because it doesn't add equipment coloration. And yes, in case you have wood that is of this quality, then or that kind, or this kind, or that kind, then that is a very good thing, because these types of wood create resonances that you don't want to transmit between your cabinet and your air. However, if you have a proper grain structure, properly pressed plywood, in that case you want those resonances to be transmitted to the air, because what a good high-grade plywood does is whatever resonances are inside the cabinet, it's going to transmit those resonances to the room, plus the upper harmonics and usually 1 octave lower harmonic as well. So basically your plywood will act, the plywood cabinet acts as a resonator, as just does the same work as the body of the violin does. And that is something that you want to hear with the sound. Why? And the reason why is because it's tremendous amount of energy that the room can get from a loudspeaker cabinet. You can easily have a 2-3 dB additional sensitivity, additional efficiency from your loudspeakers when you have a live cabinet. And that's one reason why I am very much pro the live cabinets, because when you have that much amount of increase in loudspeaker efficiency, that is absolutely transformational on the sound, and it has much higher gain when you go higher in the efficiency scale compared to going lower in the efficiency scale, because with higher efficiency you get higher dynamic capability, higher dynamic range. And when companies do dead cabinets, and as a result they have lower efficiency loudspeakers, then it's not just a gain that they have a cleaner sound, but it's a tremendous loss because they are losing dynamics. So it's very important when your loudspeakers are less efficient. It doesn't mean just that they need more watts from your amplifier to play the same volume, but it also means that you have lost dynamic resolution. So I think this is it for now, and I hope that this helps everyone to think about loudspeaker cabinet material. I haven't talked about real wood yet. Real wood have the same application principle as I have talked about when talking about these guys. When you go for real wood, look for the same feature that you would look at a spruce, that you would use for making a violin, which is like a luthier grade or musical grade instrument wood. If you use just a regular wood, then also try to look for more and more of those edge lines, more and more of those lines, so that they are unbroken. There's as few knots on the wood as possible. If you cannot avoid knots, well, that's for another story. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. Please like, subscribe. Bye bye.